Welcome to this episode of Navigating the Fog of Change. I'm Tom Doorley of Sage Partners, and I'll be your host today. My guest today is George Young, Global Vice President of Cyber and Digital Services at Rockwell Automation. Welcome, George. Glad to have you on the conversation.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Tom.
So what we've been doing on this set of episodes is dealing with this issue of this incredible change that has kind of hit us. It is, we call it massive, fast, and forever. And we have to deal with it. In order to deal with this, it's going to require some new ideas, some new thoughts, some new ways of behaving. And so that's what we've been talking about. And that's what George and I are going to talk about today. And we're going to start, George, with this idea of the fact that this particular change, which we agree is daunting, right? We're both on the same page with that. Unlike a crisis, is hard for people to react to initially. If you have a crisis like in COVID, man, everything's got to change. We've got to do something. 2 decades before that, we had the global financial crisis. Again, something we could do. This one, though, is a little bit below the radar. It's important and it's hard, but it's not quite in everybody's front and center, right in their face. So talk about, George, how you make the case, how you see the fact that as you're talking to your clients or even inside Rockwell Automation, how you make the case that this thing is a big deal.
Yeah. So first, I think we have to define the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the thing we're talking about? And what I tell people, my job is at Rockwell Automation is to help our clients achieve a future where they're taking advantage and delivering secure digital operations. So the idea is to be secure because we've entered into a world with the advent of the importance of computing, but also cloud computing, various forms of computing. We're in a world where cybersecurity, and everybody feels this. We know it at a personal level because people are getting swindled out of their life savings every day, et cetera. And manufacturing operations, I tend to work with manufacturers, people that make things. There are lots of things in the news about manufacturing facilities that are targeted and are having to pay ransomware or worse because they have lost the security of their operations. So the cybersecurity piece people get. The digital piece, it's another thing to define. When I say digital, I mean the intersection between new technology and artificial intelligence, machine learning. That is also something that many of us are aware of because our phones are giving us answers and searching for things seemingly, almost clairvoyantly. No, they're just listening to what we're saying and they're trying to give us, what we want to hear. So, I think people see that, but then they don't always make the connection of how is that impacting how I'm running a plant or how I'm designing a product. And so that's my team. We help clients, again, deliver secure digital operations.
And I think that's really sort of central to the issue here, because clearly we're shifting more and more and more to a totally digital world, and we need to have the capability to do it effectively, but also securely, as you say. So one of the things we say is we're working through this idea of the fog of change with our clients. We said there's so much noise going on that you have to be careful and you have to find a way to keep the organization focused. So we talk about picking 5 things and putting into what we call a leader's change agenda. And I've worked with you and your people, George, on creating the format, the structure for the leader's change agenda. So we developed the leader's change agenda. How do you make sure that what is in the presence and the mind of the folks in the C-suite actually has meaning to the rest of the organization? Because it's important that this message cascades from the C-suite down to the folks who are at the firing line, whether it's the machine level or whether it's the field sales force or even the developers in the coding room.
Yeah, no, great question. And for those who have embarked on a program of digital transformation, one of the things that we hear a lot is that they didn't get a return on their investment, or they didn't see it. They did a bunch of proof of concepts, but it didn't really materialize. It didn't actually transform the organization. And so the, you know, I think some people feel compelled to act, but they're not thinking clearly about how to act. And then they're not thinking clearly about the impact of the change at all levels. Because, if you go into a plant and you say something about artificial intelligence or increased automation or driving autonomous operations in manufacturing, which is a lot of what we do at Rockwell, the first reaction of a line worker, a person who's running a machine, an operator, they're going to be very suspicious or downright resistant. So you'd better think about, first of all, to get to that financial point I talked about, getting the return, you ought to think about not delivering a proof of concept, but delivering a proof of value. So the first thing is, I'm not going to do a proof of concept on, let's say, extended reality in the workplace. The combination of virtual reality, augmented reality.
Right.
I use this example because when I talk to clients, a lot of times they think of value also only in financial terms.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you convince the workers that you aren't just trying to get rid of them? One of the ways is introducing extended reality, because you can use extended reality to train an operator on a piece of equipment they haven't used before.
Mm-hmm.
They can work on it in a virtual setting where there aren't dire consequences to making an error. One of my favorite examples is using it for lockout and tag out of a machine, something that happens all the time in a manufacturing location, something that workers are expected to do. And then again, depending on the setting, if you don't lock out and tag out a piece of equipment correctly, you can have injuries, even fatalities. And if we use extended reality, in a handheld, we can use a handheld pointed at the piece of equipment. The handheld will recognize the piece of equipment, will call up the correct lockout, tag out procedure, walk the operator through the procedure, perform the actuation, and make sure that it's done efficiently and safely. And by using it, we also get important information about the time it takes the operator to perform the operation. We can use that data to figure out how can we do it more quickly, more efficiently. So, if you have an agenda that has multiple potential digital components, having something in safety tells the workers something important, that you're looking at value holistically.
And I like what you said right at the beginning, where you said that sometimes it's important to say, as opposed to charging right in, sort of what the old line, sort of move fast and break things. That's ridiculous. A good leader will step back, as you're describing there, and figure out what we're trying to do, how to make it work throughout the entire value chain. And I like the idea.
What has the most importance? What has the most value? And then, of course, you're going to do things that have great financial return. But as you're working on those things, that's another thing. I think we have an advantage at Rockwell Automation because the data that drives digital transformation is born at the machine. And so We need to extract the data from the machine. And what we want to do is we want to develop operators that are not, you know, button pushers and, you know, we want to evolve the type of labor that is involved at the front line. We want to have decision makers. And what we're doing through AI, and that's why I always say we conduct our proof of value at the machine. My team literally sits with an operator and we say, you know, why do you operate the machine this way? Why do you make those adjustments? Because they have their own intuition that they use to optimize the production from that machine. We can use that to set up the kind of data analysis that we use when we build training models to develop algorithms to do predictive, then prescriptive automation of machines. Because they're involved, they have a pride of ownership. Because they're involved, they, you know, and they begin to produce more, you know, for example, tires from a tire building machine. Mm-hmm. Then all the other operators on the shop floor are like, wow, look at that. Kevin is producing, you know, more tires than me. What's he doing? You get a friendly kind of incentive, you know, very base incentive to learn and to produce more. And you get them all involved in it. You just want to make sure it doesn't threaten, because if you do, your efforts won't work.
Yeah. And I think your use of the word value is really important. I'm very focused on the use of language. Value has a lot of meaning to me. Proof of concept, I get that, but value, you're talking about value.
Well,
that makes a lot
that's
of
the thing.
sense.
Proof of concept comes from the IT world and a focus on enterprise applications. And it made sense. We do conference room pilots. It's a proof of concept. We don't do proof of concepts in manufacturing. You have to do a proof of value, and you don't want to shut down. You don't have the luxury of shutting down machines that are supposed to be producing. You better know what you're doing walking into it.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So here's the third thing, the third little challenge to talk about, challenge to talk about. So we create our leaders change agenda. You've got the message you're taking down to the factory floor and all that sort of thing. But it turns out there's so much uncertainty that whatever we define as the leaders change agenda today is surely going to be different in the future. So how do you get the people? And also, here's the other thing. We're going to learn a lot about what happens at the firing line, which you talked about. What happens at the machine level could really be important to influence the entire organization. So how do you make sure that feedback loop exists, that you're able to listen to the people on the firing line, and that when you make changes, it's understood? Because, it's natural. We're going to be having changes.
Yeah, well, that is another thing that I think separates, again, when you think about how leaders have reacted to change in the past. You and I both have a management consulting background. Mm-hmm. You know, the way that, you know, we used to do it was to do, you know, strategic planning. Maybe you would be doing scenario planning. You'd build your 3 to 5 year plan. And if you're implementing, you know, an IT system, something like SAP, if you're implementing a philosophy of change, Six Sigma, things like that, they can follow a stepwise agenda. Things are changing so rapidly with the capability of machine learning that, you know, I've been, in the last 5 years at Rockwell, the changes have been very dramatic. We didn't used to do much with generative AI. Mm-hmm. Now we do, there's almost nothing that we're not using multiple AI techniques to optimize a solution. So, you know, your plan, having a 3 to 5 year roadmap for digital, you know, what I always tell people is planning, and I think Dwight Eisenhower, I think it's a Dwight Eisenhower quote, which is, plans are nothing, planning is everything.
Yeah.
So what you have to get into is, and you're talking about the fog of change, you have to get into a dynamic planning process that is happening continually. And you're changing your prioritization, and you're changing what you're doing, you know, your digital projects, et cetera, constantly. In cybersecurity, when we talk about protecting those digital assets, in cyber, it's a changing landscape. So we have to take a layered program of defense. You know, literally, you're trying to defend, and you can think of it, and many of the people, of course, in cyber are ex-military. So there's lots of military analogies, but the thing is, I'm putting in multiple barriers. You figured out this, bang, you hit another wall, right? And we want to be able to see how any intrusion is progressing and stop it. And we want to have intelligence. It's another thing you talked about. We want to be, you know, that you and I have talked about, is looking out for what's new out there, because, you know, that is changing all the time. So in cyber, we have to really be understanding what's happening in real time to be able to protect the enterprise effectively.
I think you're right. It seems to be one of the things sort of related to that is that of the things we're better at seeking danger, right? We're better at sort of the risk thing. I mean, you and I both have a background back at Deloitte. Deloitte, like other consulting firms, has a big risk management practice. That's all about danger. And so we say you do need lookouts, people who are looking out and watching for danger, but you need opportunity seekers too, people who are the scouts, as you're pointing out here, and sort of laced in your conversation, is that with all this change going on, man, there's just enormous opportunity. How do we make sure that we're seeking opportunity as well as sort of protecting ourselves from the danger?
Yeah, and again, in cyber, but you can do it in digital. A lot of times, a really effective technique is to set up intentionally adversarial teams that will try to, you know, as you've developed something, okay, I came up with a new digital solution. Now let my cyber team try to hack it or try to break it. You know, you can set up adversarial or red teams to try to challenge those assumptions, because somebody's going to.
Yeah, and I think that works. And these military analogies, I think, are useful because they actually work. They actually have impact.
Exactly.
Right? So as you think about sort of the future, anything in particular that you think is sort of out there that we haven't really talked about, sort of something that is unusual, that is something not necessarily to worry about, could be an opportunity, but something that's sort of out there in the wind we haven't really started to identify as a change issue?
Well, one of the things that, I mean, this is like really way out there, so forgive me if I'm, going beyond the bounds of just business. But the question is, how are we going to skill people? How are we going to have a society where the types of skills that are going to be necessary, artificial intelligence is going to replace a lot of tasks that we currently do. It's going to change our lives. It is changing our lives. Again, if I use management consulting, people used to pay us hundreds of thousands of dollars for market assessments, just kind of go out there, find out all you can about this, put it together in a nice report, boom. I'm doing that myself in an afternoon. Mm-hmm. And it has to be vetted. I'm going to have people look at it. But the starting point is amazing. You have the ability to access, the accumulated knowledge of the human race. So now everything becomes, people, the role of people in society, it changes. You're going to have higher value placed on being able to use the tools that are available. You're going to have new problems to unlock that we haven't been able to unlock. And the point is, the thing I worry about is there a point where a certain group of people becomes disenfranchised?
Yeah.
The thing you were talking about how do you go from the top to the operator level? It's something we have to think about as a society.
I think that's really important. It's sort of a challenge for us to think about. I think about sort of, I've grown up as a management consultant, as you have, and I was a management consultant right from day one as I came out with my MBA. So in the organizations that I had, for every 100 people, you had about 20 people who were junior people. We called them business analysts or whatever.
Yeah.
Today, you only need 5 of them. So there's some jobs have disappeared. Further, the way those people learned, they did each next step up. So they were business analysts and a consultant, associate consultant, manager, senior manager. So they learned how to do the work, learned how to lead the work, manage the work, sell the work. How are we going to teach them to do that if they don't have the opportunity to practice? If they don't have other people to, and it is a challenge. So I think your idea of how we're going to skill people for the new era, I think is really a daunting challenge. I think it's really important. Yeah. But George, I'm betting though, as we sort of close out here, I'm betting that in spite of all the change, in spite of all the noise, in spite of all the fog, that you're reasonably positive about the future. You see the future as being something that is unwinding in a good way.
Yeah, I'm extremely positive about it. I'll just give an example of my journey with artificial intelligence. I started my career, I was in management consulting, but I started my career as a PhD chemist in the chemical industry, and I was working with plants, and I was involved early on in the application of neural networks in something called model predictive control to optimize the operations of a plant. And so, and then I started learning these concepts, and I said, well, how could I use these neural network concepts to build more efficient formulation and catalyst design? I was designing catalysts at the time. So I was like, what's the interaction between the types of materials that I'm putting on the catalyst support, the particle size and various characteristics of the support, and the performance that I get? And I started using mathematical models to predict the performance of the catalysts, and it worked. Back in those days, I worked with a statistician, and we had to wait until like midnight, and we would run our computations on
when the computing time
Department
was
of
cheap.
Defense or DARPA
Yes.
mainframe
Right.
computers, and we could work on like 4 variables at a time.
Right.
And now we're doing this kind of work on the advent of cloud computing and increased CPU processing.
Right.
We do this on a handheld with extremely complex measures.
Yes.
We're looking at computational fluid dynamics, doing incredible calculations that were not possible. So why am I positive? I'm positive because the problems that I'm a problem solver, and the problems we get to solve are more interesting every day. And people, I'm not I'm not the youngest guy in the world, and people are always asking me, why don't you retire? You can see by my background, I've got a nice place. I could have a good time out there, but I really love what I do, and I love the problems. People come to me with these interesting problems to solve. So I look at it, I'm still an R&D scientist. I'm out here trying to solve problems, using the latest technology, making sure it's secure. And it's just, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. And in my time with you, I see that. I feel the same way because, yes, I like to see it as sort of understanding the way the world works and try to make the world better. I consider us, you, and what we do as being one of the helping professions. Yeah, we're sort of
Exactly.
helping the world get better. And with all this change going on, we can either say, well, it's going to overwhelm us, well, what can we do? Or we can say, maybe we can sort of put it together in a better way. And I'm on that side of it. I appreciate that.
Likewise.
George, thank you very much. I look forward to figuring out how together we can sort of make even more impact than we have thus far. So thank you for joining me. And thank you all for
Absolutely.
listening.
Thank you.
George, if folks would like to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
You can by email, it's george.young, very simple, at rockwellautomation, one word, .com. So george.young at rockwellautomation.com.
Super. And of course, as you know, I'm T. Doorley at sagepartners.net. We're a .net, not a .com for whatever set of reasons, but that's the way it works. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate the input that you've given to us that's helped shape these various conversations. So until our next meeting, take care, be well.